All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to try something here. I'm going to read To Kill a Mockingbird to you like an English teacher would read it. And I want you to follow along in the book, follow along with the video, and we'll also work through our To Kill a Mockingbird reader's log here. So we're going to do all those things. And hopefully this helps you with the book. To get started, I'm actually using this edition right here of To Kill a Mockingbird. So those will be the pages I talk about, page numbers, and you can follow along with me. I see on the cover, this is the 50th anniversary edition, mine says, and it's the winner of the Pulitzer Prize, which is a pretty impressive prize. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to turn in to the first few pages, and there's a dedication. It says, "For Mr. Lee and Alice, in consideration of love and affection." Mr. Lee, I think, is Harper Lee's father. And Alice, I think, is her sister. And then there is a quote. It says, "Lawyers, I suppose, were children once," by Charles Lamb. Chapter 1. When he was nearly 13, my brother Jem got his arm badly broken at the elbow. When it healed, and Jem's fears of never being able to play football were assuaged, he was seldom self-conscious about his injury. His left arm was somewhat shorter than his right. When he stood or walked, the back of his hand was at right angles to his body, his thumb parallel to his thigh. He couldn't have cared less, so long as he could pass and punt. Alright, so I'm going to stop for a second and talk about plot. There's one major question in this story, and it's going to be about Jem's arm. So I'm just going to put here, Jem broke his arm. Okay. And then over here I have a funny word. It's called assuaged. And I'm going to say assuaged probably means eased. When his fears of never being football were assuaged. Maybe I'll put eased away. When enough years had gone by to enable us to look back on them, we sometimes discussed the events leading to his accident. I maintain that the Ewells started it all, but Jem, who was 4 years my senior, said it started long before that. He said it began the summer Dill came to us, when Dill first gave us the idea of making Boo Radley come out. So I have something going on, and it's a question. It's what started it. Let me use a semicolon. Let me do this right here. What started it all? Jem says, or Scout actually, she says it was the Ewells. Okay. And Jem says instead of that, it was when Dill came. These are all characters. Alright. Now this is where Scout, who's a young girl, gets kind of bossy and know-it-all. I said, if he wanted to take a broad view of the thing, it really began with Andrew Jackson. If General Jackson hadn't run the creeks up the creek, Simon Finch would never have paddled up the Alabama, and where would we be if he hadn't? We were far too old to settle an argument with a fist fight, so we consulted Atticus. Our father said we were both right. So Atticus said they were both right about the arm. Now, something I see here is a mention of Andrew Jackson, so that's a historical reference, um, a historical allusion. And I think that this is Scout trying to be right at any cost. I know that Andrew Jackson, it was a real person. So I'm going to put him over here in the connect area. And if I want to know a little bit more about him, I might pop over just to a Google search and type him in. Take a look at him. There he is. Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States in 1829. Now, I know this novel is set in the 1930s. She's saying, if you want to take a long view of how Jem broke his arm, go back 100 years. That seems kind of outrageous, and something that maybe someone who just has to be right all the time would say. All right. Atticus is their father. He said they're both right. And then we have one more person in this little thing, which is going to be Simon Finch. And he is Scout's great, maybe grandpa. Being Southerners, it was a source of shame to some members of the family that we had no recorded ancestors on either side of the Battle of Hastings. Oh, here's another funny little reference to history. Andrew Jackson was the 7th president. Now we have the Battle of Hastings. She says they're ashamed that they can't trace their history back that far. Well, let's see how far back that one is. There it is. The Battle of Hastings was fought on 14th October 1066 between the Norman French army of Duke William II of Normandy and an English army. Well, there we go. There's the Battle of Hastings fought by knights on horseback. Is it really a sense of shame that they can't trace their family back that far? I certainly can't. But those historical allusions are the ways that Scout proves she's right, because what does she have to fall back on except for what she knows? All right. All we had was Simon Finch, a fur-trapping apothecary from Cornwall, whose piety was exceeded only by his stinginess. In England, Simon was irritated by the persecution of those who called themselves Methodists at the hands of their more liberal brethren. And as Simon called himself a Methodist, he worked his way across the Atlantic to Philadelphia, thence to Jamaica, thence to Mobile, and up to St. Stephen's. Mindful of John Wesley's strictures on the use of many words in buying and selling, Simon made a pile practicing medicine. But in this pursuit he was unhappy lest he be tempted into doing what he knew was not for the glory of God, as the putting on of gold and costly apparel. So Simon, having forgotten his teacher's dictum on the possession of human chattels, bought 3 slaves, and with their aid established a homestead on the banks of the Alabama River, some 40 miles above St. Stephen's. He returned to St. Stephen's only once, to find a wife, and with her established a line that ran high to daughters. Simon lived to an impressive age and died rich. So what do I need to know about Simon Finch? Well, it's about the Finch's history. He was a slave owner. He had a big family. Okay. And he's way back in Scout's family. Now there are some other allusions to things like John Wesley, Methodists, and Cornwall. I'm guessing Cornwall's in England because it says that. Methodists must be a group of religious people, and John Wesley is probably a Methodist. I could look those up if I want. I'm not going to look up each thing, but there's some other things in here. Um, we can put any vocabulary. I saw some things in here. I'm going to put the word dictum. I'm going to put the word chatels. Those are things I can come back and I can either try to figure them out now or look them up. Let's just look up one of them real quick. Dictum. Let's see. It says here edict. It says, go back a little bit. An authoritative, often formal pronouncement. So it sounds like it's something that's a command. By the way, we're listening to 1930s music. So let's put a command from an authority. Now, if you already know these words, or you find other words, go ahead and add them. We can do anything in this box. Okay? Right now we're adding vocab. We looked at some things that we wanted to connect or clarify here with Andrew Jackson and Battle of Hastings. We could also visualize what we can see, try to make predictions, ask a question about the text, and there are some other things we can do as well. Let's read on here. It was customary for the men in the family to remain on Simon's homestead, Finch's Landing, and make their living from cotton. The place was self-sufficient, modest in comparison with the empires around it. The landing nevertheless produced everything required to sustain life except ice, wheat, flour, and articles of clothing supplied by riverboats from Mobile. Simon would have regarded with impotent fury the disturbance between the North and South, the Civil War, as it left his descendants stripped of everything but their land. Yet the tradition of living on the land remained until well into the 20th century, when my father, Atticus Finch, went to Montgomery to read law, and his younger brother went to Boston to study medicine. Oh, there's our quote. Lawyers, I suppose, were children once. Atticus is a lawyer, and his kids are, of course, children. Their sister Alexandra was the Finch who remained at the landing. She married a taciturn man who spent most of his time lying in the hammock by the river, wondering if his trot lines were full. When my father was admitted to the bar, he returned to Macomb and began his practice. Macomb, some 20 miles east of Finch's Landing, was the county seat of Macomb County. Atticus' office in the courtroom contained little more than a hat rack, a spittoon, a checkerboard, and an unsullied code of Alabama. We see some pictures of Atticus here. He's the white man with the glasses. His first two clients were the last two persons hanged in the Macomb County Jail. Atticus had urged them to accept the state's generosity in allowing them to plead guilty to second-degree murder and escape with their lives. But they were Haverfords, in Macomb County a name synonymous with jackass. The Haverfords had dispatched Macomb County's leading blacksmith, in a misunderstanding arising from the alleged wrongful detention of a mayor, were imprudent enough to do it in the presence of 3 witnesses, and insisted that the son of a bitch had it coming to him was a good enough defense for anybody. They persisted in pleading not guilty to first-degree murder, so there was nothing much Atticus could do for his clients except be present at their departure, an occasion that was probably the beginning of my father's profound distaste for the practice of criminal law. All right, that paragraph often makes my students snicker and laugh because there's swear words in it. And I just want to say, if we look at the character right here of Scout, a young girl, do you think she means those words to mean what they say? Or do you think that's what she heard? My guess is Scout knows a lot because she's been told a lot, but that she doesn't really understand that foul language. We're going to run into worse language because this is a story, on one hand, about a little girl growing up. And then on another hand, it's a story about racial tension and racial prejudice. So we're going to run into words. I don't pull punches. I just read what it says. We can talk about it. Okay? Now, during his first 5 years in Macomb, Atticus practiced economy more than anything. For several years thereafter, he invested his earnings in his brother's education. John Hale Finch was 10 years younger than my father and chose to study medicine at a time when cotton was not worth growing. But after getting Uncle Jack started, Atticus derived a reasonable income from the law. He liked Macomb. He was Macomb County born and bred. He knew his people, they knew him, and because of Simon Finch's industry, Atticus was related by blood or marriage to nearly every family in the town. All right, I'm going to stop there for this part, and we'll pick back up in the next part. Thanks, guys.